Right, what is going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel in this week's video. Today, I'm going to take you through my current shoulder workout, my delt day, and as suggested by the title, take you through some of the things that I've implemented into my delt training, my shoulder workouts, to improve my pressing strength, but in the correct way and in a way that will translate into muscle gain in the delts. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so first exercise you can see is a dumbbell press. What I do here is pyramid sets, as always, 5 by 10. Firstly, you can see that my elbows are tucked. What this does, it allows for a safer and a more comfortable lengthening of the front delt, so it allows you to come into the pocket of your shoulder a lot easier than if you were flared out, where coming below parallel will start to cause some internal rotation of the shoulder, which is obviously not only going to increase your likelihood of injury, but is going to lower the stability of the movement and therefore lower the amount of force that you'll be able to generate at the bottom of the movement to do the next rep. So that is obviously going to impact your strength, and if you're not half repping and you're actually trying to get into a fully lengthened position, increase the range of motion and provide more stimulus for the delt in the eccentric portion of the contraction, just tucking those elbows ever so slightly and being able to comfortably get down as far as your shoulder mobility allows you, which is one huge proponent of not only your strength but also your ability to grow muscle in that area. Being able to come further down into the movement is going to provide a lot greater stimulus in the eccentric portion of the movement in the lengthened range, and therefore elicit more muscle growth. And as you can see, as we move through the pyramid, this does not change when I get to heavier weights. I don't stop prematurely. I get into that position because I'm comfortable getting down into the pocket of the shoulder, getting a good stretch on each contraction. And although I'm not doing any pauses in the lengthened range, I'm not bouncing out of the movement. I'm not using momentum to drive it, therefore building strength in the vulnerable and the compromising position where you are likely to fail if you are not strong enough to lift that weight. Obviously, shoulders and pressing strength is not a huge strength of mine personally. That's why the weights are as they are. But if you go to a previous video of mine, you'll see, as by the title, I put on a considerable amount of weight onto my movements, and not only am I stronger, but I perform them even better. And this improvement in execution is a massive contributing factor to my increase in strength. As you will also see, there is a slight gap between the bench and my back. This is because I've shifted my bum a little bit forward on the seat to help keep my lower back and my spine neutral, which in turn will allow me to create a safer and a much stronger brace in my core between the reps, which will translate into more force being produced into my pressing movements, as well as being safer. My top set being 40 kilos, the highest I've ever lifted. This was the first time using this weight. As you see, is a little bit shaky, which is going to offset the amount of force being produced, therefore will slightly limit my ability to press the weight, which obviously in time and over the coming weeks, I'll not only progress the reps aspect, but I'll also improve my execution. Obviously my form is good here. I'm still keeping tucked. I'm still getting down into a good range of motion, getting into that length and ranges and pressing up well, not speeding up my reps. Being more comfortable lifting a weight over the coming weeks, I'll be less likely to shake because I'll be less nervous and also be better acclimated to that weight. And that last rep was a grinder of a rep. Okay, now we get into, in my opinion, the most important factor that has improved my strength in my overhead pressing movements and my shoulder training. You can see on this prime machine, we are using a dead stop technique. In terms of muscle building, this is a great way to standardize your form, as you're not using momentum to bounce out the reps and you're starting from a set standardized point for each rep. There's no differentiation between depth, momentum, bounce, pause. There's no differentiation between any of those factors in the bottom of the movement in the fully lengthened position, as we are stopped by the safety stoppers and we're always starting for the same point, almost the first rep in a sense for each rep of the set. And this in turn translates into strength building as well, as we are making sure that the delt is the primary driver of the movement rather than the force generated from the stretch reflex that is happening at the elbow. In a dumbbell movement, you come down nice and slow in your eccentric and then quickly do that, a quick bounce at the bottom. You can have perfect form on the way down, but if you speed up there to bounce out, that is using momentum, stretch reflex at the elbow to drive that first part of the movement. Whereas when you get to a weight where you're unable to do that, you will not have the sufficient strength to push past this part of the movement where you are likely to fail on a compound lift. Having dead stop in place means that you have to drive with the front delt, in this case, get past that early portion of the contraction. And using a prime machine, as you can see, there's 3 pegs on the side, the top being the beginning range, the middle being the mid range, and the bottom being the end range of the movement. And the more weight you stack on that peg will increase the difficulty of that portion of the movement. As you can see here, I have like a 1.5 to 1 ratio of top to middle. I have the seat at its lowest point so that my dead stop is happening. I'll come to the side here, just below parallel parallel, not all the way down here or not too prematurely up here. Another two factors that are important to improving stability in your pressing movements, which will translate to overall strength gain, are as follows. So firstly, I spoke to you about bracing and that shifting the bum forward to create a neutral spine. What you also want to do is retract your scapula when you're pressing to keep yourself tighter. Like I said, trying to make your torso as rigid as possible. So firstly, for muscle building, you're only pressing with the intended muscles, and secondly, for strength building, that you're not losing force generated by instability and wobbling around. Keeping your core braced, like I said in the first clip, having that neutral spine, like I said in the first clip, and then having the scapula retracted are the three main torso related stability factors that will increase your strength and help to shift as much tension to the intended muscles as possible for muscle building purposes. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about leg drive. You may have heard in pressing movements like the bench press for powerlifting, leg drive is a very, very important cue, technique, however you want to put it, to implement into your setup to improve your strength. The same thing applies to movements like the shoulder press. So you will see as you get to the end of a long rep set, people start tapping their feet. I am definitely a culprit of doing this myself, but it's very important in heavy compound lifts such as this to keep your feet dug into the ground, push into the ground, creating that counter force with the floor to keep that bottom part of your body tight, which will then translate upwards, as I mentioned previously. Keeping your whole body apart from the arms, pushing through the elbows to generate force through the shoulders for your overhead pressing movements. Like I said, with the wobbly elbows, force is being lost through the wobbly elbows in my top set of dumbbell press, but no force is being lost from the rest of the movement. It starts from the ground up. So you drive your feet into the floor, you push against the floor to create that counter force, which then translates up into your lower back. Like I said, keeping that neutral spine, that is why our bum is further forward on the seat. And then you create your brace through your core, scapula retracted for your upper back, and then you're pressing through the intended plane of movement as we're keeping tight, keeping braced and keeping fixed. And this is very important when it comes to strength training and producing as much force to lift as much weight as possible. Okay, that covers the strength part of the talk through. Now I'm just going to take you through the rest of my workout. Done a lot of front delt work through our pressing movements, and now we're moving into side delt work. This is my favorite exercise at the moment, is a lateral raise into a pronated front raise, supersetted with regular lateral raises. So as you can see, I'm coming up into a lateral raise and then bringing my arms across my body. So I'm not coming up too much here, and I'm not coming too much down here that my shoulder internally rotates. So I perform 10 of each exercises, so it's a 20 rep set. And the cues I use for this is to drop my traps and push my hands into the ground to readily create tension in my side delt and minimize as much trap as possible. Obviously you will not be able to negate it completely, but minimize the contribution of the traps from the start, which will then teach you not to shrug the concentric part of the movement and prioritize the use of the middle head of the delt. Again, 5 sets of this. I did 5 sets of the prime press before, which I forgot to mention, and then 5 sets of the dumbbell press, all 10s. So 10 on a dumbbell, 10 on the prime press, and then a 10-10 superset. So I guess 20 reps overall of the lateral raises. Next, we're moving into rear delt flies. Again, 5, but this time by 15 reps of this pyramid. Focusing as much as possible, driving through the elbows to put as much tension on the rear delts as possible. Trying not to retract the scapula. I was talking about retracting the scapula in the pressing movements. This time we want it protracted, so relaxed and kept forward, so that you're driving as much with the rear delt as possible. Obviously, with the rear delt being in front of the body with a protracted scapula, you'll be able to generate more force and keep more tension on the rear delt. Whereas if you're retracted, your upper back muscles, your traps, your rhomboids, etc. will take a big brunt of the load, which may mean you'll be able to lift heavier and progress, but you need to check yourself and keep accountable that we're doing a rear delt fly, not an upper back fly. Hence, we want to use as much of the rear delt as possible throughout the entirety of the movement, stretching it out in the length and range and really squeezing and shortening the rear delt in the short range, not coming back like this and using our upper back to finish the movement. Obviously you can't completely isolate the muscle, but using these little cues to push your arms in front of the body and to protract the scapula will help to minimize contribution from these supporting muscles. Next, we have a new exercise to the workout. Well, not new to me, but new to the channel. It's a pull down machine. It's the prime pull down machine, but it diverges, so it comes away from the body as you contract. You want the movement path to stay close to the body when you're training your lats. This machine may not be the perfect machine for the lats, although it is a pull down. However, if you set up your body in the correct way, the diverging nature of this machine can be very complementary to training your rear delt. So as you can see, I'm really pushed into the machine. When I do the movement, I am not pulling down as much as I am pulling back, meaning that the emphasis of the movement is shifted up the back, away from the lats and towards the rear delts. I am not puffing my chest up to the fact that I'm retracting my scapula and incorporating my upper back muscles over my smaller rear delt muscles, but I'm coming at an angle in which I'm still pulling back, but I'm also not trying to come out of the movement plane of the machine. I'm gonna hope that this is in focus, so I'm shifted in so that I'm naturally like this. I'm not puffing my chest and retracting my scapula, but I'm angling myself in a way in which I can, when I come down, I'm pulling down into my rear delts rather than down into my lats, and then the machine handles move so I can pull back at the same time, starting off as a rear delt row and then at the ends sort of emulating a end range of a face pull in more of a fixed and standardized manner, in which when I'm struggling I can't just throw it out like this like you can do with face pulls on using a rope, for example. I did 5x15 on this again. Another thing I wanted to mention, a good flare in the elbows to furthermore take away from my lats. As you may have seen from my back training video where I differentiate the cues and the execution techniques that separate upper back training from lat training. If you haven't seen that, I will leave a link in the description below for you to check out. It is my best performing video. But as I mentioned, when you are rowing for your lats, you want to keep your elbows tucked to the body and keep the movement as tight to you as possible. And as your elbows come away from the body and they start to flare out, the tension shifts up the back, away from the lats into the mid back, and then finally to the upper back, the most exaggerated flare, putting the most emphasis on the rear delts. And you know what they say, you can never get enough lateral raises for delt growth, more precisely the medial head. We've got a machine lateral raise here. The way I have this set up is I'm stood as far back on the foot plane as possible, and instead of coming to the side of my body like I did with the dumbbells, I'm coming in like a 45-degree angle away from the body, where the end range of the movement almost ends up as a Y raise. So this is attacking the medial head of the delt from a different angle to what I did with my other lateral raising exercise. When I've got a wrist wrapped on and I'm having my hands there as hooks and raising through my elbows to drive as much tension through the medial head as I can. What I did here is I did a 4-set pyramid just to accumulate and accrue a little bit more volume on the lateral head of the delt as possible, to make sure that they are brought up with the other two heads of the delt and make myself as wide as possible from the front view. As you can see from the wrap up overall of the video, we've got 2 front delt anterior deltoid muscle exercises in the form of 2 pressing movements. We've got 2 medial head delts exercises in the form of lateral raises, being exercise 3 and exercise 6 here, and then exercise 4 and 5 being our rear delt movements, a fly and a pull down row face pull hybrid variation. But this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click that notification bell so you don't miss another upload. My prep is starting soon. I'm very excited to bring you along the journey. There will be regular weekly prep this many weeks out sort of vlogs, and I will try to get a second upload to make it 2 a week, where I do separate videos away from my prep, maybe some more specific details into my prep rather than the weekly overview, but also stuff like this where I go through my training, which although the general principles of the training will not change, there will be some slight nuances that may differ as I get closer, maybe in terms of stimulation rather than progression when it comes to like the last week or so, to manage fatigue, volume reductions, maybe some little other techniques that may be brought into play, like I said, to manage fatigue, and to especially when you're dieting. Fatigue is a massive proponent, but also risk of injury increases while in a deficit, while you're lower body fat. So there will be some slight changes to account for that, but more will come when the time comes. So that is why you need to like, subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Leave a comment down below of what you do want to see when that time comes, or if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about. But for now, I am out. This is the end of the video and I'll catch you all next week.